Say sorry to my brother or leave my house, my wife demanded at dinner. So, I stood up, walked over to him and said one sentence that destroyed 3 marriages including ours. Alright, Reddit. This happened back in October and my buddy Derek said I need to post it here because apparently my life is now a cautionary tale about in-laws, toxic family dynamics, and what happens when you finally grow a spine after 6 years of being treated like garbage. My wife screamed at me to apologize to her brother in front of 14 people at a family dinner. Instead, I stood up, walked over to him while he sat there smirking like he always does, and said one sentence that made the entire room go dead silent. 20 minutes later, 3 marriages ended that night. Mine included. Buckle up. This is going to be a long one. My name's Nathan. I'm 38 years old and I work as an aerospace engineer at a mid-sized firm out here in California. Until that Saturday evening in October, I genuinely believed I had a decent marriage. Not perfect by any stretch but solid enough to build a life on. Solid enough to talk about having kids someday. Solid enough that I thought we'd grow old together. Shows what I know, right? My wife Megan and I had been together for 8 years total. Married for 6 of those. We lived in a comfortable suburban house in Riverside. Nothing crazy, but a nice place in a good neighborhood with a 2-car garage and a backyard big enough for a dog. We had decent jobs, no kids yet, but we'd been talking about starting that conversation more seriously. I was pulling in about $140,000 a year at my engineering firm. Good money, stable career, nothing flashy, but respectable work that I genuinely enjoyed waking up and doing every day. There's something satisfying about knowing your work is literally floating around in space right now, helping people on opposite sides of the planet talk to each other. My designs are up there. My calculations. My late nights and early mornings and weekends spent running simulations. That stuff matters. Even if nobody at dinner parties ever wants to hear about satellite communication systems. Megan worked in marketing for a boutique agency downtown, making around $75,000. Between us, we were doing better than most couples our age. We had savings. We had investments. We took nice vacations to places like Hawaii and Costa Rica. From the outside, we probably looked like we had everything figured out. The house, the careers, the life plan. But if you've been married for any length of time, you know that what people see from the outside rarely matches what's happening behind closed doors. And in our case the problem had a name. Megan's older brother, Garrett, was 42 years old, tall with that Kendall good looks that made people assume he was successful before he even opened his mouth. You know the type. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect handshake. The kind of guy who walks into a room and immediately starts scanning for the most important person to talk to. He ran a real estate development company that his father-in-law had essentially handed him on a silver platter. Garrett liked to present himself as a self-made man, constantly talking about his vision and his drive and his entrepreneurial spirit. But everyone who knew the real story understood he'd married into money and position. His wife Elena came from old money, the kind of family that had country club memberships going back 3 generations and vacation homes and places normal people only see on Instagram. From day one of my relationship with Megan, Garrett had made it crystal clear he didn't think I was good enough for his sister. Never said it directly at first. Just little comments here and there. Death by 1,000 cuts, you know. Aerospace engineering, huh? That's steady work, I guess. Or Megan, you sure you don't want to date someone with a little more ambition? Someone who's going places. Or my personal favorite, must be nice having a government-adjacent job where you can just clock in and clock out. Some of us are out here actually building things. Always delivered with that smile, that smug, condescending, punchable smile. Always followed by just kidding, man, when he saw my reaction starting to shift from polite tolerance to something darker. But over the years the comments got sharper, more pointed, more public. And Megan, instead of defending me, would just laugh it off like it was nothing. That's just Garrett being Garrett, she'd say whenever I brought it up. He doesn't mean anything by it. He's like that with everyone. Except he wasn't like that with everyone. He wasn't like that with Kyle, Amanda's husband who made partner at his law firm. He wasn't like that with any of the cousins who worked in finance or medicine. He was only like that with me, the aerospace engineer who worked with his hands on complex problems instead of shuffling money around and calling it entrepreneurship. I should have seen the writing on the wall years ago. But I loved Megan, or at least I thought I did. So, I kept my mouth shut, kept my head down, and kept showing up to family events where I knew I'd be treated like the help. The dinner that blew everything up was supposed to be a celebration, a happy occasion. Megan's parents, Richard and Patricia, were renewing their vows after 40 years of marriage. 40 years. That's a lifetime of partnership, of compromise, of building something together. They wanted to mark it with a big family gathering at their house, catered meal from this fancy place downtown, the whole production. Megan's younger sister, Amanda, was there with her husband, Kyle. Garrett and Elena, of course, they'd never miss an opportunity to be seen at a family event. Megan's aunt and uncle drove in from San Diego. A few cousins filled out the rest of the table, 14 people total, all dressed up in their finest clothes, all pretending to be one big happy family with no dysfunction hiding beneath the surface. I knew it was going to be a rough night when Garrett pulled up in his brand new Tesla and immediately started talking about how he'd paid cash for it. Couldn't even fit all the cash in the briefcase, he said with this theatrical laugh while we were all standing in the driveway. Had to use 2 bags. But when you close a deal like I just closed, you treat yourself right. You know how it is. He looked right at me when he said that last part. You know how it is. Like I would ever know how it is to pay cash for a luxury car because I closed some shady real estate deal. I just smiled and nodded. Same thing I'd been doing for 6 years. Don't rock the boat. Don't make a scene. Don't give Megan a reason to be embarrassed by you. Keep the peace. That was always the mantra, wasn't it? Keep the peace. Swallow your pride. Don't cause drama. Let the little comments slide because fighting back would just make things awkward for everyone. 6 years of keeping the peace had gotten me exactly nowhere except to a dinner table where I was being publicly humiliated while my wife studied her plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Dinner started pleasant enough. Patricia had outdone herself with the decorations. White roses and candles everywhere. Soft music playing from speakers hidden around the dining room. The table looked like something out of a magazine. She'd clearly been planning this for months. Richard gave a touching speech about 40 years of marriage, about partnership and commitment and choosing to love someone even on the days when it's hard, about building something that lasts. We all raised our glasses. Everyone got a little misty-eyed. It was genuinely beautiful. For about 20 minutes, everything was picture perfect. Then came the main course, and with it Garrett's compulsive need to be the center of attention. So, Nathan, Garrett said loudly enough for the whole table to hear. He was cutting into his filet mignon like he was performing surgery. Still working on those, what do you call them? Rocket parts. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest. Here we go again. Satellite components, I corrected calmly, keeping my voice even. For communication satellites, the kind that let people make phone calls and access the internet in remote areas. Right. Right, Garrett said, waving his fork dismissively. Sounds thrilling. Really cutting-edge stuff. How's the pay treating you these days? Still in the low 6 figures. The table went quiet. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Everyone knew exactly where this was going. They'd seen Garrett do this before. They'd watched it happen at Christmas dinners, birthday parties, 4th of July barbecues. Nobody ever said anything. They just let it happen. I do fine, I said simply, not taking the bait. Fine, Garrett repeated, letting the word hang in the air like it was something distasteful. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Megan. Don't you ever want more than fine? Don't you want great, exceptional? Don't you want a husband who can give you the life you deserve? Megan shifted uncomfortably in her chair, but said nothing. She was studying her asparagus like it held the secrets of the universe. Garrett, his wife Elena said quietly, reaching for his arm. Maybe we should talk about something else. This is your parents' celebration. No, I'm just saying, Garrett continued, warming to his subject like an actor who'd finally found the spotlight. Look at what I've been able to provide for Elena. The house in the hills with the pool and the view, the cars, the vacations to Europe twice a year. That's what a man should be able to give his wife. Not just fine, not just adequate, not just getting by. I felt my jaw tightening but kept my voice level. Different people value different things, Garrett. Not everyone measures success by the size of their house or the badge on their car. Of course not, Garrett said with that condescending smile that made me want to reach across the table. Some people measure it by the size of their ambition or, in your case, the lack of it. Garrett, Richard, Megan's father, finally spoke up. His voice had an edge to it I'd never heard before. That's enough. This is supposed to be a celebration. Dad, I'm just being honest, Garrett said, holding up his hands in mock innocence. Someone has to tell him the truth. Nathan's a nice guy. Sure, I've never said otherwise, but nice guys finish last. Megan deserves someone who's going to really take care of her. Someone who's actually going somewhere in life, not someone who's content to just coast along in a middling career, waiting for his pension to kick in. That word hit me like a punch to the chest. Middling. I'd worked my entire adult life to get where I was. 4 years of undergraduate engineering at a state school, working part-time the whole way through because my parents couldn't afford to pay for everything. 3 years of graduate school, living on ramen and hope while my classmates were out partying. Countless 60-hour weeks at my first job trying to prove myself in an incredibly competitive field where one mistake could literally cause millions of dollars in equipment to fail. I held patents, 3 of them actually. My work was literally orbiting the Earth right now, helping people communicate across continents. Last year, a satellite I designed key components for helped coordinate disaster relief after a typhoon hit the Philippines. Real people, real impact, real work that mattered. And this trust fund baby who'd never earned anything on his own, who'd been handed everything he had by his rich father-in-law, was calling my career middling. Something shifted inside me. Something that had been building for 6 years finally reached its breaking point. "You know what, Garrett?" I said, setting down my fork carefully beside my plate. "I think you've made your point very clear." "Have I, though?" Garrett leaned back in his chair, enjoying himself immensely. He loved having an audience. The whole table was watching now. Forks frozen midair, napkins clutched in nervous hands. "Because from where I'm sitting you don't seem to be getting it. My sister could have married anyone. She's beautiful, smart, successful in her own right. And she chose you, someone who's just fine, just adequate, just middling." "Garrett, stop it," Megan said. But her voice was weak, uncertain. She sounded more embarrassed than angry. And she wasn't looking at her brother. She was looking at me like I was the one causing a scene. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, sis," Garrett continued. "At family gatherings, when we talk about what everyone's up to, we talk about my latest development project. Kyle just made partner at his law firm. Even the cousins are doing interesting things. And then we get to Nathan and it's like, yeah, he's still doing that satellite thing. Nothing new, nothing exciting, just the same old fine." I looked at my wife. I looked right at her, waiting for her to defend me, to tell her brother he was out of line, to remind him that I was her husband and deserved basic respect. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes dropped to her plate. That's when I knew. That's when I finally understood what I'd been refusing to see for years. I'd lost her somewhere along the way. Maybe I'd never really had her and I'd been too busy working, too busy trying to be enough to notice. "Actually, Garrett," I said, standing up slowly from my chair. "I think there's something everyone at this table should know." The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Garrett's smirk widened. He was practically glowing with anticipation, thinking I was about to make a scene he could mock me for at every family gathering for the next decade. "Poor Nathan finally lost it," he'd say. "You should have seen him. Completely fell apart." I walked around the table toward him slowly, deliberately. Everyone's eyes followed me. "The reason you've been able to close all those big development deals," I said, stopping right next to his chair and looking down at him, "is because your father-in-law has been funneling money from his pension fund investments into your projects. I know this because I handle the aerospace contracts for the same pension fund. I've seen the documentation. I've seen the shell companies. I've seen where the money actually goes." Garrett's face went white like someone had pulled a plug and drained all the blood right out of him. Elena's glass slipped from her fingers and hit the table, red liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like blood at a crime scene. "That's a lie," Garrett said. But his voice cracked on the word lie. He sounded like a scared kid. Not the confident businessman he'd been pretending to be. "It's not," I said simply. "Your development company is technically profitable on paper, but only because you're getting loans at rates that don't exist in the real market. Loans backed by pension fund money that's supposed to be in secure investments for retirees, not propping up your commercial real estate venture. I've been documenting it for months, actually trying to decide what to do about it, whether to report it, whether to tell Megan first. But I think you just made that decision for me." Richard stood up so fast his chair nearly fell over. "Is this true? Garrett, is what he's saying true?" Elena was staring at her husband with a look of pure horror. "Garrett, tell me it's not true. Tell me my father isn't involved in this. Tell me right now. Who cares how I get the money?" Garrett sputtered, his composure cracking completely now. "The developments are successful. Everyone makes money in the end. It's just creative financing. That's all. Business people do it all the time. Except the retirees who are counting on that pension fund being there when they need it," I said. "Except the people whose life savings are being used as your personal bank. Except the teachers and firefighters and nurses who put their money away for 30 years thinking it would be safe. And now it's funding your Tesla and your house in the hills." Megan grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. "Nathan, what are you doing?" "What I should have done months ago," I said, looking at her, really looking at her for maybe the first time in years, telling the truth. "Your brother's been calling me a failure for 6 years, calling my career middling, mocking everything I've worked for. And the whole time he's been committing fraud and you've been letting him tear me down every single time." The dinner exploded after that. Elena was screaming at Garrett, demanding to know what other lies he told her during their marriage. How deep did this go? Was everything built on fraud? Was their entire life a lie? Richard was on his phone, stepping into the hallway, presumably calling someone about the pension fund situation. His face had gone gray. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Patricia was crying at the head of the table. Her beautiful vow renewal dinner completely destroyed. The candles were still flickering. The roses were still perfect, but nobody cared anymore. Amanda and Kyle were trying to calm everyone down while simultaneously looking horrified by the revelation. Kyle caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. And Megan? Megan was staring at me like I was a complete stranger, like she'd never seen me before in her life. You humiliated my family, she said quietly, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. Your brother humiliated me for years, I replied. Every holiday, every birthday, every family dinner, you let him. This entire family let him. Every single one of you just sat there and watched. That's not the same thing, Megan said. Garrett was just joking around. He didn't mean anything by it. You just destroyed his marriage, his reputation, everything he's worked for. Everything he's worked for. I almost laughed. He's never worked for anything in his life. He married money and then stole more of it. That's not work. That's crime. I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw something I'd been refusing to see for 6 years. She wasn't upset because her brother was a fraud. She was upset because I'd exposed it, because in her mind, protecting the family image was more important than protecting her husband's dignity, more important than the truth, more important than the retirees whose savings were being stolen. Apologize to Garrett, Megan said, her voice rising now, her face flushed red. Apologize right now for making those accusations in front of everyone. They're not accusations, I said. They're facts, documented facts, and I'm not apologizing for telling the truth. Then get out. Megan's voice cracked like a whip. If you can't apologize to my brother, then get out of my house right now. The room went silent again. Everyone was staring at us. The aunts and uncles, the cousins, everyone frozen in place like statues. Your house, I said quietly. The house we bought together? The house I've been paying the majority of the mortgage on for 6 years because your salary didn't quite cover your half. Our house, Megan corrected herself. And I'm telling you to leave if you can't apologize. I looked around the table one more time. At Garrett, pale and sweating. At Elena, mascara running down her face. At Richard, still on the phone in the hallway. At Patricia, sobbing into her napkin. At all these people who'd watched Garrett tear me down for years and never said a single word. At the family that valued image over integrity. At my wife, who was choosing her brother over her husband, even now, even after everything that had just been revealed. I'll pack my things tomorrow, I said. My voice was calm, steady. You can have the house. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce. Megan's face went pale. Divorce? Nathan, wait. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I interrupted. You meant exactly what you said. You just didn't think I'd actually leave. You thought I'd apologize. You thought I'd cave like I always do, but I'm done caving. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. Drove to a hotel downtown, checked into a room on the 4th floor, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall for about 3 hours, just staring, not thinking, not feeling, just existing in the aftermath of what had just happened. My marriage was over, 8 years gone in 20 minutes. Not because of some dramatic betrayal like cheating or lying about money, but because I had finally stood up for myself, because I had finally refused to apologize for being disrespected. The next morning, I went back to the house while Megan was at her parents' place, probably being consoled by everyone and told that I was the villain in this story. I packed my clothes into suitcases, gathered my personal items, grabbed my important documents from the filing cabinet in the office. I left everything else. The furniture we'd picked out together at that store in Costa Mesa. The decorations she'd chosen for every room. The photos on the walls of vacations and holidays and happy moments that apparently meant nothing. I didn't want any of it. Each piece was a reminder of a life I'd been living wrong. I rented a small apartment across town that same week. The kind of place that's functional but impersonal. Bare walls, basic furniture from a discount store. Nothing that required any emotional investment, a place to sleep and eat and figure out what came next. It was exactly what I needed. The silence was strange at first. No one asking where I was going. No one making passive-aggressive comments about my work schedule. No one sighing dramatically when I mentioned anything about satellites or engineering specs. Just me, my thoughts, and the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in years I could breathe. The fallout from that dinner was nothing short of spectacular. Within a week, Elena had filed for divorce from Garrett. Turns out the pension fund issue was even worse than I'd thought. Garrett hadn't just been getting sweetheart loans with preferential rates. He'd been actively siphoning money through a network of shell companies, hiding the trail behind layers of corporate paperwork that would have made an accountant's head spin. When the official investigation started, it uncovered years of systematic financial manipulation. Garrett's development company collapsed within a month. Projects abandoned mid-construction. Investors scrambling to recover what they could. His father-in-law faced federal charges for his role in the scheme. The whole thing made the local business news, then the regional news, then it got picked up by some national outlets because there's nothing the media loves more than a story about rich people being terrible, complete with mugshots showing Garrett looking nothing like the confident golden boy he'd always pretended to be. Just a scared middle-aged man in a bad situation he'd created entirely himself. But here's what really surprised me. About 2 weeks after I moved out, Kyle, Amanda's husband, called me out of nowhere. "Nathan," he said, "I need to tell you something. I've been wanting to tell someone for years, but I was too afraid of what it would do to the family. Too afraid of being ostracized. Like what's happening to you now?" "What is it?" I asked. "Garrett's been doing this kind of thing for years. Not just the pension fund scheme. He's been manipulating everyone in this family his entire life, lying about his accomplishments, exaggerating his success, taking credit for other people's work, mocking anyone who wasn't impressed by him. I've watched him do it dozens of times. But every time I tried to say something to Amanda, the family would close ranks around him. They'd tell me I was jealous, that I didn't understand how business really worked, that I should be supportive instead of critical." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you're the first person who ever actually stood up to him," Kyle said. "And I wanted you to know that not everyone in this family thought you were the problem. Some of us saw exactly what was happening. We just weren't brave enough to do anything about it. I should have said something years ago. I'm sorry I didn't." That conversation stayed with me for weeks. It validated something I'd felt but couldn't prove. That I wasn't crazy. That what Garrett had been doing to me for years wasn't normal. That I wasn't being oversensitive or making a big deal out of nothing. Someone else had seen it. Someone else had noticed. And they'd been too afraid to say anything. It wasn't just about Garrett. It was about an entire family system that had enabled his behavior for decades, protected him, made excuses for him, attacked anyone who questioned him. And Megan had been raised right in the middle of that system. She'd learned from childhood that protecting the family image was more important than telling the truth, more important than doing the right thing. Some lessons run so deep people don't even know they've learned them. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. Megan tried to get everything. The house, the savings, my retirement accounts, everything. Her lawyer argued that I destroyed her family and owed her compensation for the emotional damage. They actually tried to claim that my revelation at the dinner constituted some kind of emotional abuse, like telling the truth about a criminal was somehow equivalent to abusing my spouse. But I had a good lawyer too, a really good one who Kyle had recommended. And more importantly, I had documentation of everything. 6 years of mortgage payments showing I'd paid significantly more than half. Bank statements proving I'd covered the lion's share of our bills, while Megan spent her discretionary income on clothes and trips with her girlfriends. Records showing that Megan had invested thousands of our joint savings into her brother's development company over the years without telling me, money that was now gone, swallowed up by his collapsed business. When everything was laid out in court, it became painfully clear that I'd been carrying the financial weight of our marriage for years, while Megan and her family had been treating me like a convenient ATM who should be grateful for the privilege of being included in their gatherings. We split everything 50-50 in the end, which actually meant I walked away with more than half of what I'd originally contributed. The judge didn't buy the emotional abuse argument. Not even close. But I didn't care about winning or getting more. I just wanted it over, wanted to close that chapter and never look back. The really interesting part came about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I was at a grocery store on a Sunday afternoon just picking up stuff for the week, filling my cart with the simple meals of a single guy. Chicken breasts, vegetables, rice, the basics. I was in the produce section examining avocados when I heard someone say my name. Nathan. I turned around and almost didn't recognize the woman standing there. Patricia, Megan's mother, looked like she'd aged a decade in 6 months. Her hair was grayer. Her face had new lines. She looked tired in a way that went bone deep. "Patricia," I said. "How are you? Can we talk for a minute?" She asked quietly. "I know I don't have any right to ask, but can we?" We stood there in the produce section, surrounded by people picking out apples and arguing about whether the tomatoes were ripe enough. And Patricia told me something I'd never expected to hear. "You were right," she said. "About Garrett, about all of it. Richard and I, we knew something was wrong for years, decades really. We just didn't want to see it. We raised him to believe he was special, that rules didn't apply to him the same way they applied to other people, that he deserved success just because of who he was. And we let that belief destroy him. We let it destroy everything. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you deserved better, Patricia said, her eyes welling up with tears. From all of us, from this family, but especially from Megan. She was so scared of disappointing us, of not living up to what we expected, that she forgot how to be a partner to you. She forgot that marriage means choosing your spouse over everyone else, even over your family, especially when your family is wrong. How is Megan? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Alone, Patricia said simply. She moved back in with us for a while after the divorce, but it didn't work. Too many memories in that house. Too much damage from everything that happened. She's living in a small apartment now, working long hours, not dating anyone. I think she's trying to figure out who she is without us telling her who to be. I felt a twinge of something. Not regret exactly, but sadness for what could have been, if we'd both been different people. If she'd been willing to see me for who I really was instead of through her family's distorted lens. I hope she figures it out, I said. And I genuinely meant it. Nathan, Patricia said as I started to turn back to my shopping cart. I know it doesn't mean anything now. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry for what Garrett did to you all those years. For what we all did by allowing it, for never once standing up and telling him to stop. You deserved a family that stood by you, and we failed you. Every single one of us. I nodded and walked away. Garrett's trial started 2 months ago. The pension fund investigation uncovered so much fraud that the federal prosecutors threw the book at him. We're talking wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy charges, the whole menu. His lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors weren't interested. Too many retirees had lost too much money. The judge denied bail after determining Garrett was a flight risk. So, he's been sitting in a federal holding facility waiting for his trial to wrap up. Last I heard, he's looking at 12 to 15 years if convicted on all counts. The golden boy of the Mitchell family wearing an orange jumpsuit and eating cafeteria food. Turns out all that big talk about being a self-made man doesn't mean much when the feds start subpoenaing your shell company records. His father-in-law flipped on him almost immediately. Took a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison in exchange for testimony against Garrett. He's already serving his sentence at some minimum security facility in Arizona. The country club membership his family had maintained for 3 generations revoked. The vacation homes seized as part of the asset forfeiture. 60 years of old money prestige, gone in about 6 months. Elena didn't waste any time either. Filed for divorce within a week of the indictment. Took the kids and moved to Colorado. Changed their last name back to her maiden name. Last I heard through the grapevine, she's working as a real estate agent herself now, legitimately this time. Starting over from scratch at 40 with 2 kids. Can't say I blame her for wanting to disappear. About 3 months after the divorce was finalized, my boss called me into his office. I figured it was about the Henderson satellite project. We'd been having some issues with the thermal management systems and I'd been putting in extra hours to solve it. Instead, he slides a folder across the desk. Senior systems engineer, he says. 15% raise, your own team of 4 and first crack at the DoD contract we've been chasing for 2 years. I just stared at him. What changed? You did, he said. Last 6 months, you've been different, more confident, more willing to push back when something's wrong, more willing to take ownership. Whatever happened in your personal life, it's made you better at your job. So, I'm giving you more job to be better at. The raise bumped me to $161,000. Not Tesla paid in cash money but real money, earned money. The encounter I'd been dreading happened about 8 months after the divorce. I was at this Italian place downtown with Claire. We'd been dating for about 3 months at that point. Good restaurant, quiet corner table, nice bottle of wine. We're talking about her students, about my new project, about maybe taking a trip to San Diego for the long weekend. And then I look up and Megan's standing by the hostess stand. She saw me at the exact same moment, froze like a deer in headlights. She looked different, thinner, tired. The confident marketing executive who'd always been so put together now looked like she hadn't slept properly in months. She was alone. No date, no friends, just her in a nice dress that seemed to hang a little looser than it should. For a second I thought she might come over, maybe cause a scene, maybe try to talk. Instead she just stared at me, then at Claire, then back at me. I gave her a small nod. Nothing more. She turned around and walked out of the restaurant. Claire watched the whole thing. Ex-wife? She asked. Yep. She looks miserable. Yep. Claire reached across the table and took my hand. Good. I laughed. Actually laughed. First time thinking about Megan hadn't made my chest tight in almost a year. Kyle called me again about a month ago. He and Amanda had separated, not because of anything dramatic, but because Amanda couldn't let go of what had happened. She blamed me for destroying her family. Blamed Kyle for not defending Garrett. Blamed everyone except the person actually responsible. She keeps saying things would have gone back to normal if you just kept your mouth shut, Kyle said, like the fraud would have just stopped on its own, like those retirees would have magically gotten their money back. She can't accept that Garrett did this to himself. How are you holding up? I asked. Better than I expected, honestly. I've been carrying this family's secrets for 8 years, watching Garrett get away with everything while the rest of us just smiled and nodded. It's exhausting pretending you don't see what's right in front of you. He paused. You know what the worst part is? I think Amanda knows the truth deep down. She just can't admit it because that would mean admitting her whole family was built on lies. I knew exactly what he meant. Garrett's sentencing came through last week. Guilty on all counts. 14 years in federal prison, plus restitution payments that'll follow him for the rest of his life. The judge specifically mentioned the brazen contempt for working people's retirement savings during sentencing, called it one of the most egregious cases of pension fraud she'd seen in 20 years on the bench. They showed his mugshot on the evening news. The guy who used to brag about paying cash for Teslas is now standing in front of a height chart in an orange jumpsuit with a booking number under his chin. The guy who called my career middling is now going to spend the next decade and a half learning what it's like when the government takes everything you have. I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good watching that segment. Claire and I were eating dinner when it came on. She looked over at me and just raised her glass. To karma, she said. To karma. Richard called me the day after the sentencing. First time we'd spoken since the grocery store conversation with Patricia. I wanted you to hear it from me, he said. His voice sounded old, broken. He's going to prison. My son is going to prison. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited. You were right, Richard continued, about everything. We raised him to think he was untouchable. We made excuses every time he cut corners. We told ourselves it was just ambition, just drive, just Garrett being Garrett. He laughed bitterly. Funny how that phrase keeps coming back to haunt us. I'm sorry it turned out this way, I said. And weirdly, I meant it. Not for Garrett. He earned every day of that sentence. But for Richard and Patricia, who had to watch their son get led away in handcuffs because they'd spent 40 years enabling him. Nathan, Richard said before hanging up. For what it's worth, and I know it's not worth much, you were the best thing that ever happened to my daughter. She just couldn't see it. None of us could. Claire moved in with me 3 weeks ago. We found a bigger place, a 2-bedroom apartment with a view of the mountains and enough space for her books and my project equipment. Nothing fancy. Garrett would probably call it middling. But here's the thing about Claire. She actually gives a damn about what I do. Last Tuesday, I came home stressed about a design flaw we'd found in the thermal coupling system. Most people's eyes would glaze over after 10 seconds of that conversation. Claire sat with me for 2 hours asking questions, helping me think through the problem, genuinely trying to understand. She even sketched out a potential solution on the back of a napkin that turned out to be pretty close to what we eventually implemented. You know what I love about your job? She said that night. You're literally putting things in space that help people communicate. That's so much cooler than whatever Garrett was doing, stealing from old people. Exactly. You build satellites. He built a prison sentence. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my dinner. So that's where we are. Garrett's in federal prison, starting a 14-year sentence. His father-in-law's right behind him. Elena's rebuilding her life in Colorado. Amanda and Kyle are separated. Megan's alone in a small apartment somewhere, probably still telling herself I'm the one who ruined everything. And me? I've got a promotion, a girlfriend who actually respects what I do, and an apartment that feels more like home than that house with Megan ever did. My satellite components are still orbiting Earth, helping people communicate across continents, still doing the work that Garrett called middling while he was busy committing federal crimes. The other day, I got an email from my old engineering professor. One of my former students is interning at your company, he wrote. She said you're the reason she went into aerospace. Said you gave a talk at her high school career day 3 years ago and it changed her life. I don't even remember that talk. But apparently, while I was busy feeling like a failure because some trust fund fraud kept telling me I wasn't good enough, I was out there inspiring the next generation of engineers. Funny how that works. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and helps us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.